up with a global pandemic. Pan meaning all, the whole world becomes sick all at once.
A prologue helps prepare the audience for the larger story in several ways. It can introduce the characters, world, conflict, tone, and the larger themes. But sometimes, a prologue can feel so disconnected from everything.
You're also an epidemiologist. I presume the prospect of a viral pandemic keeps you up at night as well.
No.
No?
No.
All right, well, that's our show.
The prologue for HBO's The Last of Us seems disconnected from the actual story. It's a television talk show conversation that takes place 35 years before the real story begins. On the talk show, two epidemiologists discuss the possibilities of a global pandemic.
But you, just to be clear, you do think microorganisms pose a threat?
Oh, in the most dire terms.
Not viruses, so...
Fungus.
Now, this scene accomplishes two things. One, it establishes this foreboding sense of dread that permeates the entire episode, especially the 2003 section where everything slowly falls apart around our main characters. We know that this warning is going to actually happen. It's not a matter of if, but when. And this prologue offers an explanation as to what will happen and why.
Fungi seem harmless enough. Many species know otherwise, because there are some fungi who seek not to kill, but to control.
In an unorthodox way, we've just been introduced to our central conflict, even though it hasn't even happened yet. And two, it makes the ridiculous seem realistic. When the warning of a fungal pandemic is first brought up, it's laughed off by the studio audience.
Fungus. Yes, that's the usual response.
And it would be easy for us watching at home to laugh off such a ridiculous scenario too. But writers Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann successfully ground this horror concept in reality. Dr. Newman takes a real-world example from nature. He explains how the fungus cordyceps can infect insects, for example, an ant, infect its brain, flooding it with hallucinogens, thus bending the ant's mind to its will.
The fungus starts to direct the ant's behavior, telling it where to go, what to do, like a puppeteer with a marionette. The fungus needs food to live, so it begins to devour its host from within, replacing the ant's flesh with its own. But it doesn't let its victim die. It keeps its puppet alive by preventing decomposition.
This ominous and morbid description is at first dismissed.
Fungal infection of this kind is real, but not in humans.
True, fungi cannot survive if its host's internal temperature is over 94 degrees.
But again, Dr. Newman uses real-world examples and patterns to make a hypothetical scenario feel more like an inevitability.
What if, for instance, the world were to get slightly warmer? Now, there is reason to evolve.
He pairs fungal mutations with global warming, another hypothetical scenario gaining momentum in the 1960s that we are now seeing become a harsh reality. Greenhouse gas effects and the catastrophic effects of global warming were warnings for decades that were largely dismissed. And here, a hypothetical fungal pandemic is another warning that's being dismissed. And now that global warming has happened, that invisible barrier shielding us from fungal infections feels broken. The conversation of pandemics is another triggering concept that grounds the horror in reality. We all know the horrors of a pandemic all too well. Having just lived through one where we all watched our friends and family die, as millions died around the world. A lot of discussion surrounding COVID-19 was how woefully unprepared the world was for it, in spite of numerous warnings from scientists and health organizations. And again, Mazin and Druckmann take that real-world event, a viral pandemic, and our collective PTSD from having lived through it, and put it in perspective next to the possibility of a fungal pandemic. It takes what we know, a viral pandemic, and almost trivializes it next to the horrors of a fungal pandemic.
Mankind has been at war with the virus from the start. Sometimes millions of people die, as in an actual war, but in the end, we always win. Viruses can make us ill, but fungi can alter our very minds.
That's what we should actually fear. It builds on our pre-existing anxieties and lived trauma, and by the time Dr. Newman is through with his terrifying warning, there are no more laughs.
poisoned minds, permanently fixed on one unifying goal: to spread the infection to every last human alive by any means necessary.
In his final damning declaration on the hope of mankind, lands with a deafening boom.
So if that happens,
We lose.
And before we've seen a single death, a single zombie, the overwhelming dread of what's to come has been established by the prologue. We know what's coming, and the stage is now set for the story to begin.
we'll be back.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. I told myself I was going to take a mental health break for the month of January, but sometimes you just watch something that's so fantastic and you just have to talk about it. And so I hope you enjoyed this little think piece about The Last of Us. Leave me a comment below, let me know what you thought, and also let me know if you're watching The Last of Us. Let me know what you think and if you're enjoying it. Also, like this video, share it with your friends, make sure you're subscribed, and also make sure you click that stupid bell below so that way you never miss when a new Entertain the Elk video drops. If you haven't already, make sure you also go check out my podcast that I have called Of Mice and Men and Monsters. It collides Dungeons and Dragons elements and drops them into classic literature. It's all led by the Dungeon Master, who is my wife and is also a high school English teacher. She guides us through different books like Frankenstein, Moby Dick, The Great Gatsby, Oliver Twist. I'll have a link below so you can go check that out. And yeah, I'm going to go back to my little short break, but I will be back very soon with new videos. And so yeah, I'll see you all soon.